I am Laura Dixon, and you are listening to the Naturally Thin for Life podcast, episode number 118, 10 pounds in 30 days. Welcome to the Naturally Thin for Life podcast. I'm going to teach you how to get out of your diet brain so that you too can be naturally thin for life. No counting, restricting, or obsessing. I am going to take the mystery out of it for you so that you can become naturally thin starting today. Are you ready? Let's do this. Hello, friends. Welcome back to the podcast. So I released a bonus podcast episode last week for this challenge we're doing inside of Naturally Thin for Life, 10 pounds in 30 days, which starts in a couple of days from when you're hearing this if you're listening real time. It starts April 1st, 2022 inside of the program. But I wanted to really take some time today to walk you through how we do that in the program. So whether or not you join us for that challenge, or maybe you're listening to this weeks or months or years later, I want to break down how we do that, how we lose 10 pounds in 30 days without willpower, without deprivation, without the quick rush, urgent feeling, i.e. pressure, so that you can really understand how that process works so that you can take what I teach you today and apply it to your life so that you can show your own brain it is 100% possible to lose 10 pounds in 30 days without having this terrible deprivation, urgent, rushed, diety experience. If you are listening to this real time, this episode is released on March 29th, 2022. And so you have until March 31st, so 2 days from now, to join Naturally Thin for Life if you want to come live with us for the 10 pounds in 30 day challenge. And if you are going to join, I do highly suggest you join as soon as possible so that you can get your hard copy of the workbook, which takes about 2 to 3 days to get to you so that you have your hard copy right in front of you, ready to go Friday morning, April 1st, when we dive right in. And of course, if you're already in the Naturally Thin for Life program, you will automatically get everything included in this bonus challenge because once you join the program, you're in, you automatically get access to anything we do in the future. So I am going to explain to you high level what we do to lose 10 pounds in 30 days. And then I'm going to break down each of those steps into 1 or 2 tangible things for you to do within those 5 steps. And the biggest thing I hope you take away from this is that we learn from years or decades of dieting that losing weight has to be really hard, that it has to include deprivation and willpower and force, and it has to take up a lot of mental energy, whether that's in the planning of the meals or forcing yourself to eat in a way you don't want to eat, or counting calories, or missing out on the weekends, going out with friends, or getting up at 5 a.m. to hit the gym. It's just, none of that has to be true. So my hope and my wish for you with this episode is that you can not only see how possible it is to lose 10 pounds in 30 days without any of that, but how truly inevitable it is when you do what I share with you today. You have probably heard me say this before, but there are only 5 steps to be naturally thin. Step 1, you decide your buckets. Step 2, you follow through on your buckets. Step 3, you allow your emotions. This is where you have a really calmness to any cravings, where you calm down the cravings. You don't feel out of control. Step 4, evaluate objectively. And step 5, coach yourself. Those are the 5 steps. Everything I teach you on this podcast, not just this episode, but the 117 episodes before this, every single one of those episodes falls into at least one of those 5 steps, because those 5 steps are all you need to lose the weight, to keep it off, and have the freedom of being naturally thin. So I'm going to talk about each step briefly, and then I'm going to give you a subcomponent of each of those 5 steps that you can take away from this episode and implement. And of course, inside the Naturally Thin for Life program, I break down each of these 5 steps into everything you need to know about each of the 5 steps, everything you need to do, everything you need to understand, everything you need to implement. And then you get the workbook to go out and implement all of those 5 steps. But today I'm going to talk about the 5 steps, and then I'm going to share with you 1 to 2 implementation methods from each step. And as I go through this, I first want to lay a little foundation, and then we're going to come back to those 5 steps. So I use a tool called the model, which is taught by Brooke Castillo at the Life Coach School. I was a certified health coach before I found Brooke and the Life Coach School, and a research fanatic. And you probably already know I was a CPA, I was a director at a Fortune 500 tech company, and I, at the time, had a technical accounting research job where I did technical accounting research. I was really good at technical accounting research, both in my career as a CPA in a public accounting firm, and then also when I went and worked for companies and was their technical accounting expert. And so my brain is very analytical. It's very good at gathering information, synthesizing it, and creating a really simple understanding of it. So a lot of what I would do was read hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages of complicated contracts, of technical accounting guidance. And we all think, well, maybe most people think that accounting is like really black and white debits and credits, like no. When you are in really complicated transactions, there's a lot of gray area and application and research and guidance and things that people think about for hours and hours and hours and months and months and months going into certain transactions. So that was my job. I did a lot of research, read a lot, and I would understand all of this information at a really deep level. And then I would write white papers. I would work with the auditors at the time. I would talk to VPs and SVPs and prepare decks for EVPs. And so I would really simplify my understanding from all of this kind of minutia detail to be able to articulate it to someone that didn't spend those hundreds of hours doing all of this understanding. So that's how my brain works. And so when I went to lose weight, it pretty much did the same thing. When I say research fanatic, I mean research fanatic, like obsessed for decades with losing weight. And once I really understood the model from Brooke Castillo and I became certified with the Life Coach School, it really brought so much together for me. So I'm just going to share it in the most basic form today. So in the most basic form, the model is simply a way of explaining the world. It is a tool she developed, but the way she describes it sometimes is like there's gravity, right? Gravity just exists. And then there was a human being that developed a tool to measure it. There's probably multiple tools that people use to measure gravity. The model is similar in that it's a way to give language and explanation to the way that the world works. So the way I've heard her describe it before that makes so much sense to me is like gravity exists. There's humans that developed tools to explain and understand gravity. There's the way the world works, and then the model is a way to give language to it and just explain it in a very particular way that makes a lot of sense, especially to those of us with analytical minds. And I like to think all of us, the model just makes a lot of sense. But for those of us that consider ourselves to be very logical sometimes, it just makes it super clear and clean. So I'm going to walk you through the model very simply, how we use the model, just so you can understand the baseline then when I take you through each of the 5 steps that you're going to use to lose 10 pounds in 30 days. So there are 5 lines of the model. The first line, you can imagine just like a piece of paper, right? Line 1 is this, line 2 is this, line 3 is this. And so the first line is circumstances. So these are the facts of the world. This is the way we would describe something in the most absolute, objective, neutral way possible, that if you took 1 million people, put them all in a courtroom, we would all agree. There would be no doubts. No one would contradict each other. It would just be like, yes, we all agree. So circumstances are very factual. They're only factual. So I'm going to give you an example. So the thermometer reads 65 degrees Fahrenheit, right? Like we could all easily agree on that. There would be a thermometer, there would be the number 65, and it would say Fahrenheit, right? We could all agree on that. And now I'm not getting into what if people don't know what Fahrenheit is or they use Celsius? No, we could just all agree, right? It says 65, the little degree symbol, Fahrenheit. Or another circumstance would be person said words, I love you. So 1 million of us were watching one human being, and that person articulated words, I love you, assuming we all speak English and understand and can remember what those words are, right? We would all be like, yes, person said words, I love you. We would all watch, we would all agree. The scale says 141 pounds at 6 a.m. on March 17th, 2022. Right? We could all agree on that. They're all circumstances. They're very fact-based. So first line of the model is circumstances. Then the next line of the model is our thoughts, our thinking. These are the sentences in our mind, our opinions, our perspective, things that we just habitually think based on our own biases, on how we were raised in our society, our culture, our life experiences, right? These are the ways of our thinking that is subjective. And the biggest thing to note with thoughts is that they are always optional. This is where our agency is. This is where our free will is. Our ability to change our thinking comes in when you think about our thoughts, right? The sentences, the words in our brain that we have the ability, the agency, the free will to think anything we want, right? To think anything we want. I hear, and I was reading a book recently. I can't remember what it was. I think it was a Dan Sullivan book and Benjamin Hardy book where they were talking about people in prison and talking about people that had been in prison. And even though their circumstance was the same, the size of their cell, being in prison, those people still get to think the way they want to think. That is the one thing no one can ever take away from us is our thinking, is what we choose to think. So we may have some thoughts in our brain that we want to change, and we may have some thoughts that we want to keep, right? But we get to decide. You get to believe anything you want. So the circumstance, the fact of the world might be your body weight. The scale says 141 pounds at 6 a.m. on March 17th, 2022. And you might have one thought, one sentence in your brain that says, yes, it's going down. Or you might have another thought that says, oh no, it's going up. And so our thoughts, the way we think in our brain, creates our feelings. And I'm going to use the words feelings and emotions interchangeably here. The emotions we have in our body is when we feel that vibration, right? We call it a feeling because we actually feel it. We feel those emotions, we feel the vibration in our body. For example, we feel love differently than we feel anger. We feel the emotion of productive different than we feel the emotion of dread. We feel discouraged different than we feel motivated, right? Each emotion vibrates differently in our body, but those emotions always come from our own brain, always come from our thinking, never actually the circumstance, right? So that's why the scale may say 141 pounds at 6 a.m. on March 17th, 2022, and you can have one of many thoughts, and you get to decide what you want to think. And you want to decide what you want to think in a way that serves you. And how you know if it serves you is how it feels in your body. What emotion does it create? So the thought, yes, the scale is going down, might produce the feeling, the emotion of pride or accomplishment or motivation, while the thought, oh no, it's going up, produces the feeling of hopelessness, trapped, or bummed out. And your brain may be like, no, it's a circumstance that it's going up. I have days of data to prove it, right? It's not actually a circumstance. The circumstance might be it's 141 pounds today at 6 a.m., March 17th, 2022. It was 140 pounds on March 16th, right? That would be the circumstance. Your thought still is that it's going up. And how we know it's a thought is because if you had 1 million people there and they saw the number on the scale, they all wouldn't agree that it was factual that the scale was going up or going down. And it's really important to understand this because we often think that the circumstances, the number on the scale just creates the way we feel. It creates our dread. It creates our rush. It creates our despair. It creates our hopelessness. It creates our trapped feeling. And so we want to really understand that we have all of our agency around how we think. And I'm going to explain why this is important and how it works with the 5 steps to becoming naturally thin. So we have our circumstances, the facts of the world, we have our thoughts, the optional sentences in our brain that we get to choose whether or not we want to believe, and those thoughts create feelings in our body. Those feelings drive all of our action and inaction. So the feeling of dread drives a different action than the feeling of motivation. The feeling of desire drives a different action than the feeling of apathy. The feeling of love drives a different action than the feeling of anger. And the accumulation of all of our action and inaction creates the results that we have in our life. Circumstances, then we have our thoughts. Our thoughts create our feelings, which drive all of our action and inaction, and all of that action and inaction combined and cumulative creates the results we have in our life. There are so many more nuances to the model. So I do not want to kind of bypass that there are so many intricacies and ways to use it here. I just want to talk about it in a very simplistic way so that you can understand it in the context of what I'm going to share with you next. Because what I'm going to share with you next is the foundation for why losing 10 pounds in 30 days is 100% possible without willpower. When you want a different result, right? When you want a different body, what we often focus on when we diet is solely our action or inaction, right? Remember the model: circumstances, thoughts, feelings, actions, results. We are like, okay, I want a different result. I want to lose weight, so I'm just going to focus on my action. We focus on what we're eating, what we're counting, what we're measuring, when we're working out, when we're not working out, when we're tracking, when we're obsessing, right? We're very hyper-focused on our action. And of course, the things we do and the things we don't do is going to be what changes our body weight. But when we don't actually change our thoughts and feelings that drive all of our action, that drive all of our inaction, we will never create a permanent change. It's why we would need to rely on willpower forever if we're only focused on our action. When you want to take an action or inaction, right? Like not eating is the inaction of eating. But when you have a thought process that contradicts that, so I want you to imagine your habitual thinking as something like, I just want to eat to relax right now. But you're dieting and you're focused solely on your action and inaction. You're focused solely on your behavior without actually changing this thought pattern. Then when you have the thought, I just want to eat to relax, but I can't eat because I'm on a diet, right? You have two conflicting thoughts. One habitual thought, I just want to eat to relax, and the other conflicting thought, I can't eat because I'm on a diet. In order to then create the inaction of eating, in order to then not eat, you need willpower to override the habitual thought, I just want to eat to relax. This creates so much fatigue. This is what creates diet fatigue. This is why we think we need motivation to lose weight, is because we assume that motivation means more willpower. The only way to lose 10 pounds in 30 days or to have any permanent weight loss is to instead change the habitual thought pattern when it doesn't serve you. So if you don't want to have the thought, I just need to eat to relax, because it creates a feeling of compulsion, and then that feeling, that emotion of compulsion drives your action of overeating or binging, and then you feel terrible in your body and you aren't achieving the result you want of losing weight. You cannot willpower your way in that situation to not eating and have it stick unless you teach your brain how to change the thought pattern. I just need to eat to relax. Because when you have that thought running in your brain all of the time, right? Or any thought, I'm just using this as an example. That sentence in your mind, I just need to eat to relax. I just need to eat to relax. And then your brain starts to associate it with the circumstance of, say, 8 p.m. And then all of a sudden you're like, it's 8 p.m. and I just need to eat to relax and I'm eating out of control and I don't know how to change it, right? And what most of us try to do is we're like, okay, I'm just not going to eat tonight. And we just like try to grit and grind and willpower our way through, but you haven't actually changed the thought in your brain, I just need to eat to relax, because that thought is what creates that strong urge to eat, that feeling, that emotion in your body that drives all your eating. So we're going to talk about this. How do you actually change the thought pattern in your brain? There are, say it with me, there are 5 steps. And so I want to just lay that foundation so it makes more sense as I walk through these 5 steps. Step 1, you decide your buckets. Step 2, you follow through. Step 3, you allow your emotions. Step 4, evaluate objectively. And step 5, coach yourself. So I'm going to break them each down. Step 1. Decide your buckets. So I teach a tool inside the program called your buckets. And all it means is it's a really simple tool where you are deciding in advance with your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that has your best interests at heart, the part of your brain that wants you to be naturally thin, the part of your brain that wants you to feel energized and light and airy and comfortable. You use that part of your brain to make decisions in advance. And I actually spent a whole podcast episode last week talking about decisions in advance. But you use this part of your brain with the tool called the buckets to decide how you want to eat based on your body's cues. You're the one in control. You're the one deciding how hungry you are, how hungry you want to be. You're the one getting to know your own body. The buckets is simply a tool to use your prefrontal cortex to make decisions in advance as a mechanism to better understand your body's cues, as a mechanism to retrain your habit brain to become naturally thin. So you decide, how hungry do you want to be before you eat? You get to know your hunger cues. You make friends with your hunger. You understand how food feels in your body in particular, and you decide, how do I want to feel when I'm done eating? There is so much more to feelings of satisfaction than either full or not full. There is a plethora of ways that we can describe our satisfaction levels. And so you use these buckets and you think about them as your hunger level, the food that serves you, and your satisfaction level, and you make the decision for your naturally thin self on how you want to eat the next day or how you want to eat that day. I recommend to people you either decide the night before or you decide the morning of. How hungry do I want to be? What food serves me? How do I want to feel when I'm done eating? And here's something I want to talk about here that I'm going to give you as something that you can implement to start this and to understand your buckets better and understand something that I teach further inside the program, is start with, how do you want to feel when you're done eating? So many of us, when we're dieting, the way we make our decisions around food is we ask ourselves, how much can I get away with, right? It's like, how many calories can I get away with? How many calories can I save up so that I can splurge later? It's very much like this tug and pull of how much can I work off and then how much can I get away with? Versus when you're naturally thin, that thought process doesn't exist. When you're naturally thin, the way you think about your body is, how do I want to feel in my body? That is what you ask yourself first. So you can ask yourself questions like, how do I want to feel when I go to bed? How do I want to feel when I wake up in the morning? How do I want to feel when I go to work out today, right? Does that mean I eat a bunch of food because I'm afraid of getting hungry when I'm working out? Like, for me, that's a no. And so you decide, how do I want to feel in my body? And then what food serves me? Get out of the healthy, unhealthy, clean, unclean, high calorie count, any of that talk. You just get out of it. There's just food that allows you to feel certain ways in your body. And you decide how you want to feel, what food is going to allow you to feel that way, and when you want to start eating when you're hungry. So from deciding your buckets, you're using your prefrontal cortex, and I would encourage you to start with, how do you want to feel when you're done? What food allows you to feel that way? And how hungry do you want to be before you start to eat? And just a side note on this, on your buckets and hungry, my daughter Gemma, who's 2.5, she will say, I'm hungry, as like her form of, I'm uncomfortable, can someone help me sort of way of communicating. And this started as soon as she could start talking, which was very interesting. And I think there's so many of us, we learn from such a young age to use food and hunger as a form of distraction. So she will say to me, I can see that she'll be really uncomfortable. She gets very anxious sometimes, or my perception of anxious, or maybe just shy or like uncertain, especially when she's around new people, which I'm like, perfect. Probably what should be happening with a 2-year-old. But anyways, she'll then say to me, Mommy, I'm so hungry. And I'll be like, okay, right? And I'll ask her, now we can have a more in-depth conversation about it where she can understand. But something I tell my kids on the regular, especially when I know they're telling me they're hungry, as in like, I just want a snack. I'm like, great. It's amazing to be hungry. That's your body talking to you. Like, you can totally be hungry. How many of us grew up learning that hunger was something to embrace and to love and to get to know in our body? Not me. I didn't learn that about myself. I didn't have that understanding about myself. Even if that's what my parents told me, that's not what I remember in my mind is my memory, right? So often we're like, oh no, we don't want to get hungry. And I've shared this before. I think it has come from a very well-intended place. When I think about my grandparents, they went through the Great Depression. They went through food rations. They went through true scarcity around food. And there are still a lot of people that struggle with that. But for those of us that don't, we don't need to carry this, it's not okay to be hungry thought process with us. It's beautiful to be hungry. You get to decide how hungry you want to be in your body to make friends with your hunger as part of using your buckets, as part of deciding your buckets, not only because you get to feel light and energized and your body wants to be hungry, your body's designed to be hungry, but also because you totally know how to feel nourished and satisfied when you do decide to answer your hunger. So that's step 1, you decide your buckets. Step 2 is you go to follow through on those decisions. This is where the rubber meets the road. I think that's the right way to say that phrase. You get what I mean, right? Where push comes to shove. So that was actually a terrible analogy because it is not actually push comes to shove. This is where your prefrontal cortex and your habit brain may have differing opinions. That may be a better way to say it. What we often think is that the only way to follow through on our buckets is to use willpower. So remember the model, right? Following through on your buckets goes in your action line. So rather than trying to ram over an old thought pattern and grit and grind and white knuckle your way to following through, instead you find thoughts and feelings that allow your action to be following through. You change your thought pattern deliberately and on purpose. You make a decision in advance in step 1 when you decide your buckets, and then you go to follow through in step 2. And in that follow through, you teach your habit brain a new way of thinking, feeling, being, and eating. And the more you teach your habit brain how to think, feel, and eat naturally thin, the less you think about it. This is how you get the freedom from the obsession. This is why this process leads to easily losing weight and staying there without thinking about it all of the time. So with the follow through, something that you can ask yourself that I remember talking to one of my earliest clients with was something we called pausing the tape, right? Where you go to follow through on a decision you made for how hungry you want to be, how you want to feel when you're done in the food. And your habit brain is like, I just want to eat all the snacks. I don't care. I just want to keep eating. Like I'm bored, right? Whatever your brain is telling you in that moment, in order to assist you in following through without willpower, put a pause on and think about your naturally thin self. Think about yourself an hour from now, going to bed tonight, a year from now, that version of you. How does that version of you eat in your naturally thin way? How does that version of you follow through on those bucket decisions? Because then step 3 is allow emotions. And I think of steps 3 to 5 as being the secret sauce to making steps 1 and 2 become easier and easier, because you're going to decide your buckets deliberately in advance using your prefrontal cortex. You're going to go to follow through. I'm going to walk you through steps 3 through 5 that make it really easy to keep doing steps 1 and 2. And then what happens is you don't have to actually decide in advance anymore, right? That just becomes your habitual way of thinking. This whole process, these 5 steps, is to teach your habit brain to become naturally thin for the rest of your life. And once you teach your habit brain how to do that, it's amazing that we have this habit brain. It's like, game on. You taught me this habit. I got it. Now I just think this way habitually. Now I just feel this way habitually. Now this is just how I am no matter where I go, right? That's how you truly get the freedom. But you do it deliberately. You do it consciously in advance. And then that just becomes your natural way of being. And so step 3 is allow your emotions. When you allow emotion, so when you have a feeling in your body, remember there's circumstances and then we have sentences in our brains. Those are our thoughts. Those thoughts create feelings in our body. When you have the skill of simply letting that feeling vibrate in your body without resisting it or fighting it or ignoring it, that feeling, that emotion dissipates, meaning it loses its power over you and you feel completely in control. This is how you never feel at the mercy of a craving. This is how you never fear a craving. So when you are able to do this, you can easily tap back into your prefrontal cortex, right? That part of your brain that has your best interests at heart. Allowing your emotions, making peace with different feelings and vibrations in your body is how you teach your habit brain something different very quickly, very easily, with the least amount of resistance and without needing willpower. So in the model, right, your circumstances, thoughts, feelings, actions, results, your action of eating always starts with one of 3 feelings, right? So we have a thought pattern in our brain that creates a feeling, creates an emotion in our body that drives all of our action or inaction. And eating always starts with either the urge or the desire or the compulsion to eat. I think of all of them on a progressive scale. I think all of them is really derived from desire, but I like to think about them as the urge, the desire, or the compulsion to eat. Desire is an emotion, is a feeling in your body. What I think of as desire is that low level, oh, I'm bored, I think I'll eat, and I sort of like meander into the kitchen or the cupboard. And then the urge to eat is like desire turned up a volume. And that urge to eat feels more like, when it's vibrating in my body, a strong pull. It feels like something is pulling me, like there's an energy like lifting me up and off my chair or up and off where I'm sitting and into the kitchen, and like there's a rope pulling from my chest. That's what the vibration of an urge feels like in my body. And then compulsion to me feels like there's desire, turn it up a notch, there's urge. Compulsion to me feels like you turned the stereo all the way up, like that dial is on high when you're feeling compulsive as an emotion. And that to me used to feel like I'm eating against my own will, like someone else's hands are putting food into my mouth. And the way I think about each of these emotions is we try to tuck them under the rug, and the more we try to ignore them and push them away, the stronger they get. So all eating starts with the desire. We ignore it, we try to push it away, we try to fight it, we try to willpower our way through it. That turns into an urge, and then we do that with an urge, and it turns into compulsion. And what I want to say is this, that we want the desire to eat, right? If all of our action and inaction comes from our feelings, is driven by our emotions, and desire is an emotion, right? We all want to eat. We want to enjoy eating. We need to eat. So yes, all eating starts with either desire, urge, or compulsion, right? But I think it's all coming from that desire. What we want is to have the desire to eat. We just don't want more desire than what our body wants, right? We don't want excess desire that leads to overeating, and excess desire that leads to a body weight that feels really uncomfortable. We want the desire of our body, the desire of our naturally thin body, to match the desire that we have for food. We don't want more desire than that. So when you decide your buckets and you go to follow through, right, and your naturally thin brain made the decision of your buckets, like let's say I'm going to eat 4 squares of dark chocolate tonight, and I always teach people how to have indulgences and how to do that on the regular, and so it's not like a special treat thing. I personally choose to eat chocolate pretty much every single night. So let's say you decided with your buckets, I'm going to be at a hunger level of a 4, and I'm going to eat 4 squares of dark chocolate, and you want to feel nourished and satisfied and clean and energized and comfortable going to bed when you're done. And all is well, and you eat the 4 squares of chocolate, and your habit brain is like, well, I mean, just a few more. We worked out today. It doesn't really matter anyways. I mean, there's some peanut M&Ms in there. Those sound really good, right? So in that exact moment, you're feeling the desire or the urge or the compulsion to continue eating past what you decided with your buckets. In that exact moment, when you practice the skill of allowing emotion, this step 3, you let that desire, you let that urge simply vibrate in your body. When you do this, in that moment where your habit brain is not on board totally with the decision you made with your prefrontal cortex, when you allow that emotion to vibrate in your body, rather than letting the desire or urge to grow, when you let it be there and vibrate, it calms way down. You feel 100% in control rather than out of control. To people that haven't practiced this skill, it may sound like, ooh, I don't want to do that. If I let desire or the urge to eat vibrate in my body, I'm going to give in. But the complete opposite is true. You teach your brain, oh, this is simply a vibration. This is the feeling of desire. This is the feeling of an urge vibrating in my body simply because of what I'm thinking in my brain. There it is in my chest, and it moves down into my stomach, and oh, there it is again, buzzing in my sternum. The only thing that we ever fear is the anticipation of this experience. It's only a negative anticipation of this experience that ever has any control over you. But what happens when you do this is that urge or the desire, it passes. It's a very calm experience. You aren't trying to override your old thinking with willpower. You're not trying to go for a walk or get some tea or turn on a TV show to distract yourself from the urge or the desire. You recognize it. You understand that it's a vibration in your body. It's a feeling you're having caused by your own brain. You have the skill of letting it be there, and it dissipates and it passes. And what I mean, especially when it dissipates, is any feeling like it's going to take over you or have any control over you, it completely subsides. And in this exact moment, what happens is you decided in advance that you were going to have 4 squares of dark chocolate. You decided how you wanted to feel when you were done with those 4 squares. You followed through by allowing the feeling of desire or the urge to pass in your body without willpower. What happens is your habit brain learns, oh, actually, I don't need to keep that old thought pattern of overeating that leads to overeating, right? I don't need to keep the old thought pattern of I just need to relax, and then that creates the urge to eat, and then you go and eat, right? Your habit brain, when you allow emotion, it's the fastest way to teach your habit brain. So your habit brain that has the old thought pattern, the old feeling pattern that maybe drove you to usually eat 2 bars of chocolate instead of 4 pieces because that's how you really want to feel in your body, your habit brain is like, oh, she didn't use that old thought pattern, so maybe she doesn't need it anymore. And you do this for even 1, 2, 3 days, or maybe even a couple of weeks. Your brain is a super fast learner. It literally starts to say, almost immediately, oh, that old thought pattern is simply not needed anymore. This new thought pattern is what we're doing instead. And because when you allow emotion, you feel so calm, there's such a peacefulness, you then also get to reap the rewards and the benefits of feeling so great in your body. So not only do you feel so much more in control, not only are you teaching your habit brain that old thought pattern isn't serving you anymore, but then you're like, oh, I feel so good. I sleep so much better. I wake up feeling so much better. I'm so proud of myself. That wasn't hard at all. Your habit brain learns this new way of thinking so much more quickly because you're not trying to ram it over. You're not trying to force it out of your brain. You're not trying to make yourself do something with willpower. And then that new thought pattern, I think of it as it has a soft landing spot. So then your brain memorizes the new thought pattern of oh, I love this feeling in my body. I love going to bed this way. I love not overeating. So allowing emotion is the fastest way to retrain your habit brain to think the way you want to think. This skill is something I break down a lot and we spend time practicing inside of Naturally Thin for Life because most of us have never learned it before. So while there is a step-by-step process to allowing emotion that I teach, each of us has different experiences of our own emotions, of our own ways that our body vibrates with different feelings in our body from the thoughts that we have in our brain. And so you want to find the way that you allow emotions in your body, which sometimes is different based on the feeling, the emotion that you're having. So it's really important to develop this skill and to practice this skill because it's the fastest way to get your brain on board with thinking, feeling, and eating the naturally thin way. And the other amazing thing about this skill is that it truly is a skill. You learn to allow emotions deliberately. You learn how to do it consciously with a step-by-step process, but then it becomes something you can start to do on autopilot. It's literally something your brain may start to habitualize. So recently I had this experience where someone said words to me. That was my circumstance. Someone said words to me, and the words they said to me was my circumstance. My brain's immediate thought, without any conscious interjection, was, oh, I effed that up. I really screwed that up. That thought, I really screwed that up, created a feeling of humiliation and a feeling of shame in my body. I watched my body experience those vibrations without reacting to them, without fighting them, without saying anything back to this other person. And I watched them lose their control over me. I watched them simply be in my body. And afterwards I thought, wow, I did that really easily. I didn't say to myself, okay, now I need to sit down and allow my emotion and process it and walk myself through these steps, right? I did that in the beginning when I learned this new skill, but in the matter of a couple of seconds, it didn't really do anything. But my habitual brain was like, oh yeah, we're just going to allow these emotions to be in your body and we're going to let them dissipate so that you can tap back into your brain in the way you want to use it. And so I just had that experience and I thought, whoa, this skill truly transcends way beyond food, right? It had nothing for me in that moment to do with food, but that is how my brain is being trained, right? It doesn't always happen that way. Of course, sometimes I react to emotions without allowing them in a way that I'm like, oh, would have done that different next time. But this truly does become a skill. And especially when you do it with particular emotions. So for me, the desire and the urge to eat are like allowing those emotions to experience calmness and to really not have cravings. Like that is almost 100% habitualized. So much so that I never ever feel compulsion ever. I used to feel so out of control, so much compulsion in my body. I never feel that emotion anymore. Like I can't think of the last time that I did. So then step 4 is to evaluate objectively. There are many tools I teach inside of Naturally Thin for Life, and you've heard me talk about some of them, like the scale and how much I love it and how I use it as a tool to serve you. But one of the other ways that I teach your brain to evaluate objectively is to use a weight loss goal in a certain time period. So we're going to stick with 10 pounds in 30 days. So when you're evaluating objectively, what I mean is that it isn't this like make or break when you get on the scale, right? So all of us have had the experience where we get on the scale and it literally makes or breaks our day. Like we either feel like on fire and so confident, we're so proud of ourselves, or we feel like devastated and trapped and hopeless. So when I say we evaluate objectively, you evaluate not only your progress with the scale, but you also are evaluating how food feels in your body. You're evaluating your hunger. You're evaluating how satisfied you feel and all the nuances that you learn of how satisfaction feels in your body differently with different foods and different times of the month, all of that. But another way we evaluate objectively is with a certain amount of weight loss in a certain time period. So we're going to stick with 10 pounds in 30 days. Your brain can get on board that it's possible to lose 10 pounds in 30 days, right? If I said we're going to lose 100 pounds in 30 days, you'd be like, no, that's not a chance in the world. Like, that's not even possible. There's no way, right? Unless you, first of all, have that much weight to lose and you like get surgery or lose part of your body. So when you're thinking about a weight loss goal in a time period, right, you want to choose something. I like to think of choosing a weight loss goal in a time period that is totally possible, but like pushes slightly maybe on your possibility brink. And so your brain can kind of open a window. So you may think like totally possible to lose 10 pounds in 30 days. Like maybe you've done it before, but I want you to add on to that. Lose 10 pounds in 30 days without relying on willpower or depriving yourself. Your brain might be like, that could be possible. And your mind is an expert solution creator. So it will be like, I wonder how that's possible. And it will start to go to work to show you how that's possible. So coming back to the model, when your circumstance is, say, the number on the scale today, right? Your current body weight. And you have the thought, I could lose 10 pounds in 30 days without willpower, right? And that thought is just in your mind. I could lose 10 pounds in 30 days without willpower. And then from that thought, let's say it creates the feeling of possibility or the feeling of curiosity, right? You want to know what the specific feeling is for you, but let's say it's possibility or curiosity. Then your action will be that your brain starts to gather evidence that it's possible. Maybe possible for other people and then possible for you. And your action will then be to prove that it truly could be possible for you, right? If you tell yourself, I could lose 10 pounds in 30 days without willpower, your brain may be like, maybe I've done it before. Maybe you've seen other people do it. Maybe you know the next step. You start to move towards that possibility and it starts to become inevitable. And how I believe it becomes inevitable is that you decide your buckets, follow through, allow your emotion, evaluate objectively, right? And those 4 steps are a self-correcting process. When you decide, you follow through, you allow your emotion and you make some observations, you get to evaluate and you get to make a different decision for the next day. And you literally rinse and repeat, right? Because your guide, your destination is your naturally thin self. That version of you is the one making the decisions, right? So when you follow through and you allow your emotion and then you evaluate objectively with your naturally thin brain, it literally is inevitable that you become naturally thin. And step 5, coaching yourself, is where that possibility turns into true inevitability and what makes it a forever thing. Because when you understand the inner workings of your mind, and I love using the model to do this, and when you change the inner workings of your mind, to me, that literally sums up coaching yourself. Understanding your mind, changing your mind to serve you and to create the result that you want in your life. That is how you solidify your naturally thin thought processes. I teach many ways to implement this step of coaching yourself inside of Naturally Thin for Life. It is the most robust of all of the 5 steps because I think of coaching yourself as like having a tool belt. All you need in the moment is one tool, but you want to have many to choose from. And one tool we use is accessing your future self. What are your future self models? What does she think and feel and do differently than you today? So then think about having side-by-side models. Imagine you have your current thinking, your current feeling, your current action, and your current results. And then you have your future thinking, your future feeling, your future action, and your future results, right? So you have, let's say, a diet model and you have a naturally thin model. The way to your naturally thin models and habitualizing those is by allowing the emotions of your current model, allowing the emotions of your diet model. Because when you allow those emotions to be there and you don't respond to them, it literally breaks the association. It's literally how you detach from your diet way of thinking. When you allow desire in your body and you simply know how to embrace it, allow it, it dissipates, it has no control over you and you don't respond to it, your habit brain is like, oh, I guess I don't need that excess desire. I can ditch that and I can get rid of that. So I think of as step 3, allowing your emotions is like your habit brain learning how to throw out the model that doesn't serve you, and then making room for your naturally thin models that do serve you. So sticking with 10 pounds in 30 days. Imagine you having lost 10 pounds 30 days from now. How does she think? How does she feel? How does she act differently? Maybe she thinks, I'm just a person who doesn't enjoy feeling uncomfortable anymore. No food is worth not feeling good to me. I'm a person who feels as alive and vibrant and energized in her body as possible each and every day. I have a body and I care for it deeply because it's the only one I get. I am willing to feel any and all feelings to feel amazing in my own skin. I love food. I enjoy food. And at the same time, food just isn't that important to me. I know how to care for myself and relax without needing food. I show up as more of who I want to be, the wife, the mother, the lover of myself, as the boss, the employee, the contributor to society when I feel great in my body. Coaching yourself is how it becomes ingrained, how it becomes solidified. And all you do is you simply repeat this process to your goal weight. So if you have more than 10 pounds to lose, you lose the first 10 pounds this way. And then you repeat and it becomes easier and easier because it's simply a skill set that you hone. It is a way of being. It is a version of you that you become. When you decide your buckets in advance, follow through, allow your emotion, evaluate objectively, and understand your mind and know how to change your mind in a way to serve you by coaching yourself. This is how you never fear food ever again. This is how you never worry about feeling out of control, about eating out of control. This is how you end the trapped, hopeless feelings. This is how you have the true freedom, peacefulness, and joy around food and in your own body. This isn't just how you lose the weight, but how you easily stay at your naturally thin weight. Being naturally thin is not the same as losing weight. Losing weight is an action. It's something we do. Being naturally thin is who you are. It's how you think and feel in your own body. It's how you think about yourself. It's how your body feels. And then when you are naturally thin, because that's just your habitual way of thinking, the byproduct is simply losing weight. And this podcast episode and this podcast in general may be enough for some of you to make all of the progress that you need. But if you want to dive deeper and lose 10 pounds in 30 days with me inside of Naturally Thin for Life, make sure to join as soon as possible so you get your workbook delivered and so that you're there for the kickoff right away on April 1st. So to join us, if you're listening to this real time, head over to lauradixoncoaching.com/join. The link will also be in the show notes. And if you listen to this in the future and you aren't able to come with us for the Lose 10 Pounds in 30-Day Challenge starting April 1st, you can still use that link to join us and dive deeper into these 5 steps so that you can truly have the freedom of being naturally thin for life. All right, my friends, I hope you all have an amazing day, and I will talk with you all next week. Friends, if you are loving what you are learning here on the podcast, you have to come check out my Naturally Thin for Life program. It is my on-demand lifetime access program where I teach you brand new concepts not taught here on the podcast. And I will walk you through exactly how to implement all of the tools I teach you here so that they become just a part of you. You will learn exactly how to understand your specific brain and your specific body so that you become naturally thin for the rest of your life and you no longer struggle with your weight. Inside of the Naturally Thin for Life program, you can also receive live help so that you consistently make progress and reach your goal. I will teach you how to accelerate your naturally thin journey in a sustainable way so that the change becomes permanent. The best part is that it's risk-free. You either love it or I will give you your money back. If you are ready to finally be naturally thin for life, join us at lauradixoncoaching.com/work with me. That's LAURADIXON coaching.com and click on the Work With Me tab. I cannot wait to see you there.